That's it. Yeah, fine. Good. Right. Welcome, everybody. Sorry for that bit of a mix up there. Tenant Pulse. We're about to launch our latest Tenant Pulse. This time it was on net zero and energy efficiency. It's our second, I think, of doing this, or third. I think it's the third one. And it's important that we track and see what tenants' views are on energy efficiency and net zero at the moment. And it's certainly changing over the last couple of years as the energy crisis has kicked in, and hasn't really shown much scope for reducing yet. This was only done in the last month across tenants, across all the different tenures. Right, so let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah.
So what is Tenant Pulse? It's a national platform for Wales to enable tenants and renters to give their views and experience. We do a lot of annual surveys, topical ones, specific ones as well. We've been doing some stuff with private renters in North Wales recently, a number of short surveys as well. So again, you're probably familiar with some of this, so we'll move on. So we also have a number of topical things on our website at any point, live open ones. We've got some private ones for private renters around communication at the moment, what actually bothers you as well and not bothers you as tenants. So do look on our website, just literally TPAS Cymru Tenant Pulse, and you'll be directed straight to it. So if we move on, I think it's important is how we promote it, because I think that's relevant to the results. We send it to tenants who've signed up to our database. There's a big database now. Social landlords and tenant groups promote it themselves. We promote it on social media. But also, I think what makes us different is we use Instagram adverts. We use paid media adverts to reach those younger renters, to reach a more diverse number of tenants as well. We find it works really well. We've tried a number of things. We can move to the ads. You can see there the type of things we use. And we just find it's a great way of reaching people. As I say, I think it was about, I don't know how many, 3,000 people targeted over this last month. I think about 375 then clicked through the website and completed the survey. And we found it time and time again, it works for us. So as I say, it's just something you might want to consider. When you look at Net Zero Pulse, this one, as I said, it's our third Net Zero Pulse. We want tenant views on net zero and changing behaviours. We want to test what people thought about heating solutions and financing. And I think that's something we wanted to discuss about, rent, the relationship between rent and work done on your homes. So, and we think net zero is going to be the biggest challenge in Welsh housing, and that those tenants need that voice, and this is one way of doing it. So in terms of the methodology, there was 20 multiple choice questions. All 22 areas in Wales were represented. 699 respondents. I don't know why we didn't leave it open another hour to get 700, but 699 respondents. It just messes my head that. And it was a big increase from the first one, which had only 302, and I think it beat year 2 as well. So it's growing each year. And as you would expect, in terms of population, the size, the biggest responding areas were Cardiff, Vale, Glamorgan, Rhondda and Taf. And the lowest areas, Ynys Môn, Wrexham, Denbighshire. And again, that's a little bit different to some of the normal ones. I think Denbighshire normally is much further up there. But if we move on, what type of tenant? I think this is so important. What makes Tenant Pulse, I think, different to other people is we get that mix of housing association, local authority, private renters, some supported housing, and the other is pretty much shared ownership. So I think it makes a real difference when we're looking at this. We can compare and contrast social housing to private tenants, even between housing association and local authorities. There's often difference in comms and things like that. So I think, I say, it's one of the things we're quite proud of. And if we look at that age breakdown, I say as you expect, it does get older, but I think it's because of the social housing element to it. That has a more older responding rate, and also when people move into social housing compared to private renters. So again, if you look at age breakdown here, big difference between private and social housing. In social housing, responding, it was barely 7% of people of that age, whereas in private renting, how we target these people, 29% were of that younger age. I think that's really important. The next is so some of the key themes. Actually, I'm going to hand over to Hannah. It's her report. Hannah, do you want to?
Sure, yeah, that's okay. So when we looked at this tenant pulse report, we wanted to kind of break it down into different themes, and these are some of the themes that we found that kind of stuck out more than any others. So just to run through them quickly, the first one was tenant concern around energy bills. I don't think that comes as a major shock, especially with the cost of living crisis. So there's a lot of really interesting and necessary kind of words about how tenants were impacted by this cost of living crisis and how it looks to their energy bills. The second one was awareness and knowledge of energy performance certificates, otherwise known as EPC. Third was change behavior since the cost of living crisis. Again, it was really interesting and also sometimes hard to read about how tenants were coping with this cost of living crisis and trying to pay for bills while also trying to be mindful of climate change. And so I think this report kind of shows where that all meshes together. The fourth was landlord communication with tenants on net zero, which is a big reason why we're here involved in this space, is how tenants are being communicated with, what's working, how they want to be communicated with. And then the last, which is a massive question, is funding of net zero. How do tenants kind of see the funding working out? Is it on landlords? Is it on Welsh government? Is it on tenants? Is it increased rent? And so we had a few questions in the survey that kind of allowed respondents to expand on this idea. So to jump into it, we're going to look around first at tenant concerns around energy bills. So I thought that something really interesting was that we gave 5 sentences in one of the questions and asked respondents to rank them from least concerning to most concerning. And the 5 options included reducing home energy bills, keeping rents low, having safer communities, access to local services, and lastly, tackling climate change. And the top most concerning, I guess, sentence was that the priority was to reduce home energy bills. So 40% of total respondents said that their top priority was reducing their home energy bills. And also, I think it's interesting to note that climate change and tackling climate change came in third. So it was reducing home energy bills, second was keeping rents low, and then climate change. So I think that was also really interesting to see that, it is still a big priority, and it did get ranked third out of 5. So really, really interesting to see. And then we wanted to look as well at EPC energy performance certificates. So if you're not aware, then EPC tells how energy efficient a property is, and it's ranked from A to G, A being the best and G being the worst. And so in this survey, 90% of total respondents said that they had seen an EPC chart before, but 74% said that they did not know their own property's EPC rating. And this was also really interesting. We talk about it in the conclusion a lot about what this means, and EPC can directly translate to how much you're paying in energy bills. And so I think that kind of the discrepancy and awareness around what your own EPC is can also impact how you view your energy bills. For instance, I have an EPC rated D house or flat. And so my energy bills might look a little bit different broken down than somebody with an EPC-A. But also I didn't know my own EPC rating until about a year ago. And so how does that kind of impact your own perceptions? So as I said about this EPC, we wanted to also look at tenure. And 44% of private renters knew their home's EPC rating, compared to 20% of housing association tenants and 23% of local authority tenants. And then talking about age group, the age group with the highest EPC awareness was 18 to 34-year-olds. The lowest was 65 and up, with only 20% stating that they knew their home's EPC rating. So then after this, we looked at changed behaviors, and this was something that personally I was really interested to learn more about, and I'm sure that we can all relate in that we did at least one thing to try and reduce our bills. For me, I really tried reducing my electricity use, making sure I'm switching off my lights, just doing all of the basics that can sometimes just go by me. And so we had asked respondents if they had done any of the following. And we asked if they'd reduced heating, researched energy saving tips, gone to bed earlier, reduced electricity use, or anything else. And the others, we allowed respondents to kind of comment more thoroughly on their answers. And I think that this is where some of the really interesting comments to the report came through. So we found that 85% of respondents said that they'd reduce their heating more, whether that's the temperature set or for how long the system is running. And another really interesting thing that came out of this is that there was no statistically significant difference in response by age group or tenure type. And at least I know for David and I, we were talking about the results of the survey afterwards, and we both found it really surprising and interesting that there wasn't a difference in response based on tenure or age group. So it seems like most people are trying to reduce their heating. Here are some of the comments. I just wanted to pull out a few. This is just 3, but in our report, we have many other comments. And so if tenants had responded other, then they had a chance again to expand on their answer. So a few tenants, here's what they said. One said, I use a thermos to save boiling the kettle, reduce my showers, reduce my laundry. Heaters are off in the rooms that I'm not in. Another respondent said, using the cooker less often, buying meals that cook quicker, especially in an air fryer. And the last said, cooking outdoors on wood, wearing more layers, bed sharing with the children. So when we kind of were writing the conclusion, I think that these comments really kind of impacted significantly the tone of the report and what people are having to do in order to reduce bills. So we also had a chance for respondents to click that they have not made any changes, and here are some of the reasons as to why they have not made changes. So if one said, I need to have heating on due to my disability. Another said, my partner's undergoing chemotherapy, so her comfort is paramount. And the third said, I'm already carrying out all energy changes available while maintaining my health and sanity. And I think another one to mention is that some tenants have their energy bills included in the renting costs or overall costs. And so maybe there's not a need, or maybe they don't feel significantly impacted by energy bills at that time because of their details in their lease. So I think there's a lot of different reasons why some behaviors might not have been changed. So another question that we asked in the report is if respondents had made any of the following changes, more, less, or the same compared to the previous year. So with this, I really wanted to look at behaviors that had been changed in the past year with the cost of living crisis. So the 6 statements are shopped at charity shops, cooked at home, bought local produce, walked, cycled, or got a lift instead of driving yourself somewhere, used recycle and reuse sites, and changed shopping habits to reduce costs. So this one is where things got really interesting depending on age. So there were statistically significant differences in response depending on age to the following statements. So for tenants aged 25 to 34, they had shopped at charity shops, cooked at home, and changed shopping habits to reduce costs more compared to last year. All of those 3 things, it was consistent around people from age 25 to 34, but in comparison, those aged 55 and up had no changes compared to the previous year, except that they changed their shopping habits more to reduce costs. So this shows the differences in ages and what different age people are having to do in order to reduce their costs, or maybe changing behaviors and practices more than the previous year. I know myself, I definitely relate to having shopped at charity shops, cooked more at home, and changed my shopping habits more. And so I'm sure that many of us can relate to that as well. So it's interesting seeing the differences in age and how that affects behaviors during a cost of living crisis. So then we also wanted to look at landlord communication, and we wanted to really know what form of communication had been used most. And when we talk about communication, it's not just, hey, we're going to be putting in heat pumps next year, we're going to be putting solar PV in 6 months. We wanted to know, had they been even had an introduction session about net zero, and what level of communication had been done, and if any. And interestingly enough, 86% of total respondents had not received any form of communication from their landlord. So this includes work that is planning to be done, or work that might be done, or again, introductory sessions on what net zero even is. And to plug, we at TPAS do give introductory sessions to net zero. So if you're interested in any of those, we can definitely help you out with that. But this was really fascinating because for tenants that had received some sort of communication around net zero, 32% had received an information leaflet on their doorstep or through their mailbox. 26% had received an email about net zero, and 25% had someone come to their door to tell them about the works. And then we also wanted to give a comment box and opportunities for tenants to expand on their answers. And I won't, these are kind of long quotations, so I won't read them all. But I thought that the first one was really interesting. And they kind of talked about the work that had been done or events that they had attended from their landlord to learn more about net zero and decarbonization. And so the first one says, the house has been insulated. I question the green aspect of the installation. No consideration was taken for the environment during the works, and the materials were thrown into skips at an alarming rate. 80% of each bag was thrown away. And I think that this one's interesting to pull. I mean, there's so many different reasons as to, you know, maybe they were taking them to a recycling center and it just didn't look that way at first. I mean, you don't want to make any too big of assumptions. There's different factors that could come into play in this. But that was also really interesting part that me and David have been discussing recently about what happens after the products come to the end of life. Are they being recycled, thrown to the skip, and contributing to landfill? And even the installation, is it, you know, what are the materials used, and how does that impact the environment as well? And then the next one says, a briefing event occurred for the initial installation of the heat pump, but the later installation had no consultation. And then lastly, I'll just read this one out too. I've only attended TPAS Cymru events on net zero. It was mentioned in the latest newsletter. So these are just some of the ways that landlords are communicating with their tenants about net zero. And so maybe the most, I don't know, interesting or wanted question is, who is paying for net zero? And it's a big bill that comes with net zero. And some say, it depends on who you talk to or the figures, some say, and I've read this the most, that it can cost roughly £5 billion for UK homes to be retrofitted in the next 5 years. So how is this being paid for? As I mentioned before, do we raise rents, or does Welsh government provide more funding? And so we wanted to know from respondents and tenants where they thought the money should be coming from. So 43% of respondents said that tenants should not have to pay for low carbon homes. 25% said that they would pay higher rents if there was a decrease in energy bills. And 24% said that they do not trust that the energy savings would be more than the rent increase. And only 7% said that they would pay higher rents for more low carbon homes. So I think that this kind of shows where tenants and respondents are feeling right now. And there was a level of distrust I noticed in that they feel that the rent increase would not justify the energy bill decrease. So one quote that I wanted to pick out was, I wouldn't be able to afford more rent or anything. I am struggling now. And I think that this rings true for tenants all over the country. So a few key conclusions. We're going to go into some conclusions and then next steps and a few things that we're going to be doing at TPAS after TPAS Cymru after this report, since it's been launched today, which is very exciting. But in conclusion, achieving net zero housing will cost billions of pounds, but the money will be wasted if tenants are not using these systems to their full potential and are instead looking to other heating solutions to reduce costs. And this was something that I had a bit of an epiphany about, because we're paying millions and billions of pounds to get these systems into housing and to impact and benefit tenants. And in some cases, tenants are not seeing those benefits. And in other ways, there's not knowledge that's being shared about how to use these systems correctly and in a way that will benefit tenants. So I think that's a key piece of the puzzle to note. And then it's also interesting to note that age did not impact the ranking of concerns, which was one of the first questions that I went over. But we can conclude that tenants are having to prioritize costs, which can be felt daily, as opposed to climate change, which can feel like an issue that is too far away to currently consider. And I think that also that relationship kind of does show where the priorities lie and where they have to lie. And I mean, it depends on who you ask about, you know, climate change and whatnot, but it does to many people seem like a further away issue than right now, today, tomorrow, as opposed to I have to pay my electricity bill today and don't know how to do that. So the last two key conclusions that I'll just go over is there's a level of distrust from tenants about net zero, and tenants do not feel that they will directly benefit from the installation of low carbon solutions. I went over this a few minutes ago, and this is just a conclusion that I noticed. It might not ring true for everybody, but throughout the report, I did pick up on themes and tones of distrust and tenants feeling like they're not being informed to the highest extent, which is something that I hear all the time, even in sessions or when I go to different social landlords and talk with staff and tenants. So it's just something to note. And then lastly, every tenant has different needs, communication styles, and ways of living in their homes. And unless each tenant is engaged, there will not be a net zero Wales. I think that this is something that is being realized more and more and talked about more and more. Like I said before, if we're putting in so much to get these heating solutions into homes, then we need to also be talking, communicating with tenants who will be living there with the heating systems every single day. And, you know, we just making sure that tenants are benefiting the most from these systems, which is supposed to be a major pull and benefit of net zero. So we always like to have recommendations at the end of our Tenant Pulse report. And so these are 5 recommendations that we have. And also we'll be sharing this report. It actually has been shared already with Welsh Government, and we'll be sharing it with major key people in Welsh housing. So this will be shared with them. And these are things that we hope will be taken further. So we want more case studies to be shared. Learning about tenant experience is key. This is something that I'm working with the Optimized Retrofit program on, who will be having a session about tomorrow. And we're really working together to find the best way that case studies can be shared and that tenants can actually learn about how other people are finding the systems. For example, a heat pump, is it working for them? What is it day to day, and what does that look like? And I think that we're gonna hopefully be seeing more case studies being shared in the near future. Second, landlords should be communicating with tenants on net zero works from the beginning. And we advocate at TPAS Cymru for landlords to be communicating with tenants from the beginning, during, after, and after that. And making sure that there's a system that works in place for both the tenant and landlord is what I will advocate for forever. Third, TPAS Cymru would like to see a stronger focus and inclusion of tenant voice and engagement guidelines in WHQS 2023. So again, please join us for that session this afternoon with the WHQS team. They'll hopefully answer some of your questions and then also give you a chance to, have your say in WHQS. Fourth, social landlords should be offering information sessions or places for tenants to engage with net zero. This kind of leads back to number 2. And then lastly, we strongly recommend developing relationships with tenants prior to attempting any form of decarbonization to their homes. So this kind of just wraps up all of the points that we've said before, making sure that tenants are communicated with, consulted with, engaged with, and included in the conversation. So what are TPAS Cymru's next steps? So like I said, the Pulse report should be live on our website now. So go give it a read and also share it and let us know what you think about it. We definitely want to make the Pulse reports as inclusive and as best as they can be. So let us know any feedback that you have. So the first thing that we're going to be doing, or one of the things that we'll be doing, is running focus groups. So this is something really exciting that is somewhat new to our Pulse reports. And with Net Zero, we of course want to be having communication with tenants and hearing feedback. So we've created 3 focus groups. So one being tenants who have had net zero works done to their home, the second being tenants who have a strong interest in low carbon housing solutions, and third, tenants who want to feedback and give opinion on landlord communications with tenants on net zero. So we'll be sending out invites to these focus groups to those who signed up within the Tenant Pulse survey. And we're hoping that this can cultivate communication and conversation about what tenants are looking for. I think this kind of started at our November conference, where it was in person, and I was able to talk with some tenants about why they want to be involved in net zero, how they want to be involved. And I think it was maybe a 5-minute conversation that sparked training with their landlord and net zero events with their landlord. And so I think those conversations can really become something bigger. So that's what these focus groups are there for. Second, we'll be sending out the survey. We'll be sending it out to all of the respondents who completed the survey and opted to receive a copy of the report. And then, like I said, we've also sent this report to key decision makers across the housing sector. And so we want to hear back from them, and we're advocating for net zero. And we hope that this report can offer some insight as to how tenants are feeling right now about net zero. And lastly, we're going to be giving presentations. So this is, I guess, in some form a presentation about Tenant Pulse, but we're constantly looking for opportunities to present and discuss the findings within the sector. And oh, I just noticed a spelling error. We're going to discuss the findings within the sector and media to ensure stakeholders absorb and act on the report. And I think that's another key part of it, is we're not making these surveys and reports just for the fun of it. We really want to use the insight and discussions to create change and also advocate for tenants and be there as the tenant voice. So yeah, if you want to request a session on this report, just contact that email, or you can also contact David or myself. And we're very interested to know your views on this report, and especially what action you took as a result. And then last thing to mention is we did have a prize draw, and I'm not sure if any of the prize draw winners are here, but these are the tenants who won the prize draw, and they'll be getting their prizes sent to them soon, if not already. So I think that that is all of the presentation that I have on Pulse. So if we do have any questions, I don't know if I wasn't looking at the chat, but if we do have any questions, then we can tackle those right now.
I can pick them up. Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. I know Hannah put a lot of work into that, and it's really fresh. And in terms of the data, she turned it around fast for this week. So I would encourage people to have a look at it. And in terms of following up, anyone's got any questions around splits between housing association, local authorities, things like that, if it's not clear in the report, just let us know. I know some of you contacted us before on that. So I want to just pick up some of the questions in there. That's okay, Hannah. I think there was one in the chat I'm going to start with, which was Josh was from TAF was talking about the jargon that we use, you know, the EPCs, the net retrofit. I think you did even a TikTok on retrofit. It was one of the most popular ones, wasn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Not a 70s keep fit class. You know, should we be talking more about energy reduction and bills? And I think for me, Josh, to that question was some of the first work that was done in Swansea University and things like that didn't always show a reduction in energy. I know it should, but decarbonisation, you know, taking out gas combi boilers, things like that, putting other solutions in, didn't always. Partly, I think, because we got an energy crisis, so the unit of electricity was going up quite a bit. And also some of the people who had some of the first works ended up using more electricity because they saw it as having almost free power, or it was more efficient and things like that. So some of you might remember the Home Bargains hot tubs of 2020. you know, there are a lot of people started heating things like hot tubs and stuff like that, and consequently bills went up quite a bit. So I do get it. We've agonized over this a lot, even just what do we call this week. But we're wary about some of the energy reduction bills, even though that should be the case, because it hasn't always been the case so far. So I don't know if Hannah, there's anything you want to add on that, or no, that's right.
Yeah, no, I
So
think that's all good.
there's some questions here as well. Someone asked about what's the biggest challenge to tenants when it comes to net zero being done on their home. I think for me, there's a couple of things here. Hannah and myself went to see some, when it comes to new builds, I think there's a challenge there about when tenants who are moving into new builds are actually told about stuff. We were on a site for Christmas where we were saying, I would just show them on the day they're moving in. And it's like, what, when they're moving boxes and trying to get everything sorted, and you can put that one upstairs and things like that. You're trying to show them the control panels of a heat pump and things like this. And I think there's something there about some of the biggest challenges, I think, for net zero are the ongoing care afterwards. And I think Hannah's report mentions that, you know, that this isn't something you just show people once, it's afterwards, how they're getting on with it, what optimization, is there any data? Some of the solutions that exist have data behind it. You can see, and experts can look at that and see how they can optimize their home better. And also even just down to the solutions versus the home lifestyle. There's clever people out there going, right, okay, is it a heat pump we need? Is it a, you know, different hydrogen, all these different solutions? Actually, the people in there are going to make, I think, the success or failure of those homes. And I think people need to be considered when we're putting plans together for what the solution is for each pathway to zero, each home's net zero solution.
Yeah, to add on that a little bit, there's been a comment, I don't know if everybody can see it, but from somebody about there's a need to consider post-works engagement. And I think that this is another big thing to tackle, and something that we're getting calls and questions about all the time at our office is people are wondering, is a video the best way? You know, this is how the best way to operate your heat pump. Is it a session? Is it door to door afterwards? And what's the best way for tenants to be able to look back on any tips? So I definitely agree that post-work engagement is also crucial and sometimes forgot about.
Yeah. And there was a question there about do you have any tips on how to talk to tenants about decarb? I don't know if you want to go first, or shall I? Or...
I don't mind. I can do it. I think that something that I notice is any tips about talking with tenants about decarb is first have the conversation. It seems like a really simple thing to do, but I think it can be overlooked until much later, until it's not as proactive right now as it is reactive. And I think that's a switch that we need to make. Instead of being reactive about it, being proactive and talking with tenants and seeing what would work and what wouldn't work. And I know many of times some tenants will go into discussions with their landlord about decarb or net zero, and they'll raise something that was not thought about before, and they could notice it because they're going to be living with it from the get-go. And so I think just having those conversations and I don't know, just having an open and casual discussion is what I think would be beneficial, but it depends.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's that whole journey, isn't it? I think getting a group of tenants on board at the beginning really helps with education tours as well, going to see some of these things. They can point out different things that maybe the professionals haven't noticed. I think door knocking as well, you know, that community engagement. I know there's a number of Newydd, TAF who've done that door knocking. I think it's really important as well. And I think the other challenge, I think, talk to tenants, and there's this theme of we're going to need to look at where the boundaries are in terms of responsibility between the landlord and tenants, in terms of the contract, maintenance, things like this. There was an interesting case study came up last week that was in the English Ombudsman around solar PV. So some of you may have had solar PV, or you will have it on your homes, and often it's roof mounted. And one of the things that happens is nests build in there. Sometimes pigeons, in this case was pigeons in England, wasn't it? And they went to the ombudsman because the landlord said, no, it's not our responsibility. The mess it was creating and all the disruption from having these nests under the PV. And the ombudsman in England didn't necessarily agree, and it went back and forth, and the landlord had to eventually put some wire around, it's called, some mesh, and pay compensation to the tenants. And the landlord originally was very, very confident that wasn't their responsibility. And I think we're going to need to see some evolution around our contracts, where the lines are when it comes to net zero solutions, because we're going to see some new issues and some new challenges, and that's where discussion comes in. I noticed in the chat somebody said, where can I find the results of the latest Pulse survey on your website, please? We'll make sure it's in the link. I don't know if anyone's out there in the rest of the TPAS team, whether you can put it in there. But I would imagine if you Google TPAS Cymru Tenant Pulse, it should come up there. But we'll make sure we're putting that in the next 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So anything else on people's questions? What have we got here? Yeah, Carl, interesting one. Firstly, the use of contract holders. I'm very much against the term contract holders. It was never meant to be used public. I know that's a discussion I've had with a landlord recently who are using it. I don't think it's a helpful term, but I know where you come from in the purpose of this. Contract holders aren't going to agree to something that potentially costs them more money, particularly if the work's going to be invasive. It shouldn't be costing them more money if we're doing this right. If we are committed to find the right solution for that home, we should see a reduction in those bills. That's the I think if tenants are paying more afterwards, then I think something's gone wrong there. And we're not in control admittedly of the unit price of electricity, but we do need to make them warmer, more insulated, so that when they do use a unit of electricity, even if it is more expensive, it should bring the bills down. But yeah, that's why we need case studies. We need sharing of experience, and why we're trying to do that through this week and other things that we're doing at TPAS. Anything else, Hannah, you see in there?
No, I don't think so. I think all good.
Yeah, Addy saying there, it'd be great if houses would include their contractors in the bid to educate tenants. Yeah, I think you're right. Is it Sonon? The people who make batteries, they make a really good video, simple video with Pobble, just about how to reset the battery afterwards, because some of the battery, like all things in life, we've all had to switch on and switch off and switch on again. Literally a 1-minute video. It was just so, I looked at it, I was like, oh, I quite like that. We're going to need contractors, suppliers to make post-care material that's accessible, multiple languages, easy to understand. It could be video, it could be literature. We're going to need a number of these things, and contractors definitely got a part to play in it. As long as those contractors are able to communicate with tenants effectively. Some of them aren't always, they send their technical people along, and maybe that's not their skill set. But yeah, I agree with you, Addy, totally. Anything else anyone wants to ask? We have about 1/4 hour, but I don't like keeping people for the sake of it. Whilst you're having to think if there's anything on there, we will send the link out. Anna, could you just maybe see if it's live and put it in the chat? Yeah. What I would mention is this afternoon, it's WHQS session with Welsh Government, and we asked them to speak, but then they came back and said, actually, we're still fine-tuning part of WHQS, and we genuinely would like to discuss it with you and get your views in that session. So there's a real chance for you to still have a say in WHQS too, but also learn about some of the bigger things that are coming out as part of that. So that's a session this afternoon. The same link works that you came in this morning, works this afternoon. So do have a look at that. And tomorrow, retrofit day, customer experience day, and two great themes tomorrow. So
All right, I think I have the link here.
yeah,
Let me put it in the chat and then everybody can
yeah.
take a look.
Addy's also mentioning about transparent procurement as well. I think tenants being involved in that procurement, I think it's also quite important, as well as these technical people who make those decisions. And I think more transparency, that commitment from suppliers as to how they will engage, how will they do their post-care implementation, how will they track how tenants are getting on with the solutions, so that they do benefit from it. And then I think if the tenants benefit it, the supplier can get better case studies and better evidence for their solutions. So yeah, definitely. Good point, Addy. Right.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, as we said, just let us know your thoughts. Please send us an email if you have any thoughts or comments about the Tenant Pulse report, and we're really interested to see what you think about it.
Yeah, yeah. Good. In which case, unless anyone's got anything else, Hannah, I think
Then we'll see you at 2 p.m. Yeah.
Thank you all for coming this morning. I thought it was a good session. The minister gave us real hope and optimism of the sheer scale and commitment that people are involved in. And I hope you get a chance to read in more detail Hannah's Pulse and let us know if you want more detail or want us to present somewhere. We want this report shared and people acting on it. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. We'll close this session.